welcome you all to the Sierra Cosworth. Now this is prime Sierra Cosworth. This vehicle is one of the greats, isn't it? What an iconic car. And if you didn't watch the last video, you might not have. I have this for the week from the owner, so massive thank you to Jimmy, the owner. And today we're going to delve into more of an overview / review of the Sierra Cosworth. This one, to be exact, wait, is a crystal blue, which is, you know, get in the comments, one of the rarest colours that Sierra Cosworth came in this era. This is a pretty factory car, if I'm honest, which is exactly why I wanted to grab it and sort of take it on an overview / review of what it's like now in 2023 to actually drive one of these things. What's it actually like? We'll talk about prices, we'll talk about what it's like. As recently, I've driven a Renault 5 GT Turbo from a similar era. I own a Series 1 from this era. I've driven an RS Turbo from this era. So first thing I'm going to note, and I've said about it being a relatively standard car, there's a few bits here and there. It's got a diff in the back of it because the owner likes to treat it like a Sierra Cosworth, such a lad. So yes, it does step out very, very easily, this thing, when you want it to. I don't have the talent for it, but I know full well this car goes sideways incredibly easy. It has a sort of back box just to let the flow go a little bit more. The owner isn't really that bothered about how fast this thing is. It's about the whole package, isn't it? So this is a 3-owner 59,000 miles. In fact, as we are driving right now, it's just clicking over to 60,000 miles. It's incredibly good numbers for such an exquisite car from its era. So this is what it would have been like. This is pretty much exactly how they all would have been, bar an exhaust and a diff in the back. And I must say, no wonder they went down a bloody storm when these cars came out. It is absolutely joyous to be in this thing. It feels light on its feet. It wiggles around when you want it to. The noises and the sensation that Cosworth 2-litre turbocharged engine gives you up front is like nothing else from its era. I couldn't fathom when I picked this car up how different it actually was to my Series 1, a car that I've owned for over 3 years now, done many miles in, thoroughly enjoyed it. This is like sort of the other end of the spectrum. It's a lower mile, lower owner, 4-door, higher horsepower vehicle from its era, from a same manufacturer, but it feels completely alien to the Series 1. Now, I'm not going to sit here and compare it to my Series 1, but that's quite a good basis for me to understand what this car is actually like now. Again, they are very different cars, but this just feels comfier. It feels a lot more well built. I mean, there's more materials in here than a Series 1 from a similar era. The steering feels different. The back end, of course, is pretty lively when you want it to be. The position of the seats is a real big one as well, because if you haven't driven one to the other, you wouldn't necessarily notice, but the Series 1 is lower and it feels like you're in the car. You don't necessarily feel like you're on the car in here, but it's a better perspective and a bit of a comfier drive, because you're not necessarily hunkered down inside the car in this one. You're sort of at the right height. The interior is very similar to, you know, same Ford stuff from its era. So dials are up here for your heating. The original radio, this is so cool, with the balance and fade just down at your fingertips. Dials are relatively similar to the Series 1, 3-spoke steering wheel. Recaro seats are phenomenal, aren't they? I mean, look at them. They're untouched, these seats. They look and feel like they've never been sat in these seats. Aged incredibly well, this car. No cracks, no bangs, no horrible drawbacks you would probably expect from an older car. This car doesn't have it. It's got a really cool little center display here showing your lights and if your doors are open and stuff. That's quite a cool feature. As we turn down, the clutch is nice, gearbox nice and clunks in. Very, very lovely to drive this. You could daily this in 2023 so easily. And not have any problems whatsoever. You could very easily just pop to the shops in this, pop to work, go and take the kids to school. It's still that car. And I drive new stuff. I've owned new stuff. This ain't light years away from the newer stuff. I could very easily daily drive this car. In fact, the owner of this car does daily drive it as much as he possibly can. Even with that mileage on it, he said, no, I'm still going to drive it around. And I appreciate that down to the ground, because regardless of mileage and what cars are worth these days, he's still out here driving it. And thankfully, he gave it to me, to us, for the week, so we could go and enjoy it. Show you guys around this thing and just show how lovely it is. We're underneath a tree today because the sun's in a bit of a funny position, but I'm going to start off with the Cosworth engine, of course. 2 litre turbocharged, relatively standard, few bits that have changed. Ford logos on the battery. I mean, this is as OEM as you're going to get these days. I know there's some proper original ones out there, but this is pretty up there. Headlight protectors, such a cool flex in my opinion from this era of Ford, because these are horrendously expensive these days to actually find for any Ford. That's something that is just so cool, and I wanted to point out. The crystal blue paint as well, again, as I've already said, a very hard to find colour. I like to say rare sometimes, but it's relatively hard to find, isn't it? Let's be honest. A crystal blue version of this. Original wheels on there, powder coated by MJG grits, looking absolutely stunning with the Falcon tyres. Original mud flaps, just little bits and bobs like that. It just makes the car. And as well as, of course, a few imperfections, because of course this is relatively daily driven throughout the summer months. That's why I've been given the keys to this vehicle on such a lovely weekend and week to have this. Coming around the back, exhaust system, it has a back box on it to give a little bit more of the sound from that Cosworth version coming out the back. Sounds insane. Cosworth badging there, looking the nuts. Relatively original as well. I mean, he even wanted to point out that it's not completely be all and end all restored, because as you'll see, the spoiler is actually showing signs of wear. So that's something the owner 100% wanted to point out, is that yes, they've all sort of had bits and bobs done to it, the Cosworths, the RS turbos from this era, but this one is sort of unmolested and basically unpainted as well. It hasn't been completely fully restored. A lot of the paint on this car is, again, original paint. We will come inside and show you guys how lovely this interior is. So door cards, all original, 3-spoke steering wheel, Recaro seats with just the nicest wear, no crazy wear. I mean, a lot of these had serious wear on bolsters. I mean, the bolster over there looks brand new. Interior is on another level. It smells amazing in here as well. And just as you'll see throughout the dash, it's just such a lovely place to be. Very original, no cracked or, you know, horrible bits of plastic in this, very as it was when it left the factory, even down to, as I've moved them, the waffle Ford mats, something that a lot of Ford owners out there are all about. Let's talk about values, because we come into a 30-mile-an-hour limit, into a nice little bit of thatched cottage here and rows of houses and stuff. Let me know in the comments what you think about this. So Sierra Cosworths, they're a little bit all over the place. This is a rear-wheel drive variant, not a 4x4, so it slides around if you want it to very easily. This car, 35 grand, 40 grand maybe on a good day. That's how much a colour, an ownership and a mileage could differ, because, you know, a higher mileage one maybe has a couple of paint imperfections, a lot more owners. They're a lot less money. You're talking 20 grand for, you know, sort of an entry-level Sierra Cosworth these days. So of course, the more desirable they become, the more expensive they become. The worse ones, or the more entry-level ones, do become more expensive. It just means the really nice ones, like the one I'm driving today, becomes very expensive. And I've already sort of said to the owner, like, sort of irreplaceable, this, because not a lot of free owner 60,000 mile now Sierra Cosworths in relatively good colours come up for sale these days. A lot of people are hanging on to them, or they want big money for them. And he said, well, yeah, I mean, try and find another. That's the point where someone goes on eBay and proves me wrong, because there's one like straight away. But that's the best thing. Like, these cars aren't here anymore. They don't exist anymore in this sort of platform. A really good version. A lot of them were molested. A lot of them had, you know, big power running through them, which isn't a problem, because every car, my Series 1, I've taken it from the brink of being that car where it had chrome all over it, it had paint, it had this, it had that, it had an intercooler cut into the front of it. I think they've all had that, but it's then really hard for me to bring you guys the content on a car that, quite frankly, doesn't exist anymore. Cars like this don't exist anymore. Such a shame, because I would love to have picked these love to have picked one of these up for like 5 grand, 3 grand, 1,500 quid, whatever the cheapest they were at the time back in the day. And experienced one way back then. It's just a shame that I didn't. I don't know why I didn't, and I think we all should have. But it's from an era where cars now, they're a bit soulless, a bit meaningless. I've said this in the past when I've shot a lot of cars, you know, from this era, 80s, 90s performance stuff. You feel it all. You feel the steering. You feel how darty it is. The rear end's coming out and it's exciting. There's no sort of crazy aids. There's no cruise control. None of this bloody stuff you don't necessarily need. Well, don't get me wrong, I'd have cruise control on a long run. But it's stuff like that. Like, you just don't get this feeling in other cars. I know I haven't put my foot down a lot in this car because, quite frankly, 30% of my time with this car I've put my foot down, and the other I've just been chilling in it and cruising, and I've really enjoyed it. In fact, to the point now where we're stuck behind a tractor, right? And I ain't even that bothered, because I get to appreciate now the smell in here is unreal from this car. It is so good. It's so era correct. I actually, and I did put this in the intro video when I picked this up, the previous video you guys have watched, there was Wave 105's Golden Hour with George Michael on when I got in this car, and that was just like the perfect setting. I know it sounds silly, thank you Mr. Tractor, but it just, the combination of all of that is what makes this car. I know you can act silly in them, I know you can go crazy with these cars, you can go sideways very easily, they've got the power, but even just cruising, they're such a nice vehicle to be in. Sometimes for me that's the cherry on the cake, because putting your foot down is great in a lot of cars, the speed's great, but then the mundane driving around and stuff, there isn't quite that. This has it. Maybe it's just me having a soft spot for these cars and reveling in the idea that one of these would be great in my garage one day, but taking it in elements, and elements especially when these vehicles came out that they were daily driven, is my love for cars like this. Putting it in elements, not necessarily down a B road going sideways, but like taking that and enjoying it that way, but then like cruising for a town and taking it to the shops and like stuff like that. It's just, it's a multi-purpose tool. It was back then and it still is in 2023, and past that, it is a bloody rocket, this thing. I'm so impressed with how fast it is. It is just the package, isn't it? With that, guys, I'm going to thank you so much for watching. If you did like today's video, please give it a like. If you like the Sierra Cosworth, please give it a like. I would, you know, I'd like the crap out of this video if it was me. And thank you again to the owner. If it wasn't for the owner, if it wasn't for you guys watching the channel, we wouldn't be in this position today to take this Sierra Cosworth and have it for a week and enjoy it in every aspect I can. But as ever, guys, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you on the next one.